What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And loading everything up today for our first night tournament of the year at South Holston Lake. And I was going through my rods. I realized that I've never done a video going through my gear, specifically my rods and reels, what I use, and sharing that with you guys. So I figured as I was loading everything up, I'd give you the rundown, what I'm using specifically, what I use it for, what reel, what pound line, everything. Because I know I love it when videos I watch, that guys go into those details. So I thought that might be something you guys enjoyed too. So if you do like this and want to see more, give me the thumbs up. I'm going to try and run through this as quick as possible. I'm kind of a little bit on a time crunch because I just got off work. But let's get into it. I'll see if I can set you guys down somewhere and we'll run through it. Alright, I think this is going to work out just fine here. So I want to start this off. You know, obviously I'm a kayak fisherman first and foremost, so rods that have multi-purposes are very important to me because I can't have a rod locker full of rods. Now, with that said, there's a few techniques that you do need technique-specific rods for, or at least, you know, it helps tremendously. So let's run through those first, and then we'll go from there. So the first one I'm going to talk about are my crankbait rods. These are rods that, if you're going to have technique-specific stuff and you throw crankbaits, crankbaits are the rods that you do need something specific for. And the first one, this is probably one of my favorite rods I have, and this is one of the most expensive rods I have. It is a G.Loomis E6X, which is their cheapest model, 170, 180 bucks. But this is an 845 CBR, and it's a medium heavy 7-foot rod essentially. And the reason it's important for a crankbait is you need something that is very parabolic, and I don't know if you can see all this, but that loads so deep into that blank. The tip and the top third of this rod is so soft. And I've got that paired up with a Daiwa Tatula CT 6:3-to-1, always crank 12-pound lines, shallow, deep. Occasionally I'll go up a little bit heavier on the shallow stuff, but most of the lakes around here are deeper, and I'm trying to get all the depth that I can out of most of my crankbaits. So 7-foot, medium heavy, moderate action. It's a very good crankbait rod. Like I said, 12-pound line, Tatula CT. And I use this for my square bills, basically any crankbait up to about 10 foot of depth, and then I'll go to a different rod. So this is all of my shallow crankbaits. It'll work for pretty much for anything treble hook wise. I don't like it for topwater that much, but you could use it for that. Anything treble hook related, this rod would do well for. So the second of my two crankbait rods is relatively new to me, but I love it. And it is a Dobyns Champion XP. And this is like $200 and some rod. So most of my money is in my crankbait rods, but this is a Champion XP. It's a 765 CB. And I've got that paired up with a Shimano Curado DC 6:2-to-1. Love that reel. Love it for crankbaits. It's got big wide handles. It doesn't fatigue you to crank. This is a 7'6" medium heavy. This basically is my 10-foot diving and deeper. So you can throw, you know, like it's got a rock crawler on it right now, which is an 8 to 12-foot diving crankbait. You can throw 6XDs on it. If you get up into 8 and 10 XDs, it's a little much. You really need close to an 8-foot rod to throw those effectively. Same thing, 12-pound line. I love this rod. Same thing, it's got a little more backbone than the G.Loomis does, so it handles those deeper crankbaits really well, but it's still got a very parabolic action. Love this rod. It's got a full grip like the G.Loomis. Been a big fan of this rod. So to kind of keep that same thing going, actually we'll do this. The next rod I want to talk about is another newer rod for me this year, and this is an Ark rods. It's a Randall Tharp series B-Hittay, which it is my chatterbait rod essentially. It is a 7'4", same deal as a crankbait rod. It's essentially a crankbait rod, but it's got a little more backbone than those other two. It's got a very soft tip, but it's a 7'4", medium heavy, moderate action. This rod was made to throw a chatterbait, and it does that phenomenally. This thing is really, really cool to throw a chatterbait on. I love it. I've actually got a whopper plopper on it right now because it does good for that too. Anything with treble hooks, or even that big single hook on that chatterbait, it really allows the fish to get the bait really well. Chatterbaits are a bait that you lose a lot of fish on, and this rod helps with that tremendously. It allows them to get the bait a little bit better. It's got plenty of backbone, so if you're fishing it in grass, you can get it up out of the grass. This is a very, very good rod that I've been extremely happy with. I would buy another one in a heartbeat. And you could do a lot with this rod. You know, like I said, I've got a whopper plopper on it right now. It's mainly my chatterbait rod. It's always got a chatterbait on it. But you could also throw spinnerbaits on it, or deep nighttime spinnerbaits. You could throw that on it. It could even handle your, you know, medium diving crankbaits, even the deeper diving. You'd probably throw a 6XD on it because it does have that backbone. So this is a very versatile rod for what it is. I've got it paired up with another Daiwa Tatula CT. This one's a 6.3-to-1 as well. You'll see a kind of a theme here. A lot of Shimano, a lot of Daiwa. That's where I spend my money on reels these days. Oh, and one thing that is a little unconventional on this setup here is it's chatterbait, but I'm only using 12-pound line with it. Generally, I would like to use it a little bit heavier, maybe 15 to 17. But where we live, like I said, we've got a lot of deeper, you know, lakes, steeper banks, and I'm wanting to keep that bait down a little bit more. So the 12-pound line allows it to stay down a little bit, and it also gives me the opportunity to crank with it if I need to. If it was solely chatterbait fishing and we were in a little bit different environment, I would definitely have heavier line. But the 12-pound line will work. You just need to retie a lot. And I was actually just feeling my line right there. I need to retie this for tonight. So that's kind of something unconventional that I do with the chatterbait setup there. 15 to 17-pound fluoro would be the best way to go. And I didn't mention that before, but that's all fluorocarbon. That's pretty much all I use. I like Seaguar InvizX. Can't recommend that stuff enough. Now, kind of where the technique-specific rods end for me is right here. This is my jig rod. It's always got a jig on it. I would also throw some Texas rig, like, you know, flipping baits. This is my flipping rod, deep jig rod, pitching rod, everything. And it is another Dobyns Champion XP. It is a 744. So that's a 7'4", 4-power, which is a heavy power in this rod. And I'm gonna tell you, you put a 1/2 ounce jig on this thing with a trailer, and it's like it was meant to throw it. And obviously it is like the jig special, I think is what they call it. But man, it is sweet, sweet, sweet. You can just place that bait exactly where you want to, skip it with ease. Love this rod. Both the Dobyns rods that I have, I've been super impressed with. They're pricey, but they're a very, very, very good rod. This is paired up with another Shimano Curado DC 7.4-to-1 on this one, and I've got 17-pound fluorocarbon on that. That's a foolproof setup for a jig. You know, 7'4" heavy power rod, 17-pound line. It's really good. Big handle on that 7.4-to-1. That's a great, great setup right there. So now we're going to transition more into my multi-purpose rods. And before I do this, I want to say there's a couple reels that I have, or what I do on a lot of these is like this rod, for instance. We'll get into this one because this is a good example. This is the rod I throw topwaters on, but this is also the rod that I throw my jerkbaits on. I've talked about it before. It is a St. Croix Mojo Bass. It is a 6'8" medium extra fast. It is their topwater rod, but it is a very good jerkbait rod. But you need different lines for those. Like right now I've got that Lucky Craft Gunfish walking bait on it, and I've got 30-pound braid at the moment. And I like braid for topwaters, 30 to 50 pound, anywhere in there is good. But what I do, because I don't want to carry so many rods, is I will take 2 or 3 extra reels and have them spooled up with different line. So I've got my Shimano Curado 70 MGL that I use for my jerk baits and stuff. I've got it spooled up with fluorocarbon in a container in my kayak. So if I, get in a situation where I need this rod, or I need, 10 or 12 pound fluoro on a different rod that maybe I have braid on, I can just cut that lure off, throw that other reel on, tie another lure on. It doesn't take 3 minutes maybe, and it's like you have a whole different setup in your boat. So if you're limited on space, do that. Keep you a couple extra reels with different line types on it, and it'll give you some flexibility. But like I said, this one, this Mojo Bass, this has got an old Abu Garcia SX on it. Good reel, but I won't be buying any more Abus. The Shimano and Daiwa stuff is just head and tails above everything else I've used. 30 pound braid. It's a good setup. I use this for spooks, poppers, walking baits, any kind of topwater, treble hook style bait. That's what this rod gets used for. So now we're going to go into a couple others here that you see me use a lot. Now if you told me I could only take one rod fishing, it would be this rod right here. This is actually a custom rod. It is an MHX, is the blank. And this is an 843 or MB 843, which is a 7-foot, medium heavy, fast, pretty generic all around rod. You can do so much with this rod. I love it. Right now it's got a spinnerbait on it. This time of year, that's generally what's on it. Spinnerbait, buzzbait. I've thrown chatterbaits on it. I've even thrown some deeper diving crankbaits on it. Thrown swim jigs on it, Texas rigs on it. Literally, it'll do everything. Pretty much everything this rod will do. It is very comparable to in action to a G.Loomis MBR rod. The mag bass rod, and that's one of the most famous G.Loomis actions. Everybody loves it. That's what this is made after. It's very similar. It's a fast tip, but it's still pretty soft. I can place these 1/2 ounce spinner baits where I want to. You can make really accurate casts being a 7-foot rod. Love this rod. If I can only take one with me on my kayak, it's this one, because I can do so much with it. Now it is paired up with a Daiwa Tatula 100. And I've also got 17 pound line on it. I like 17 pound for my spinner baits, buzz baits, all that stuff. Gives you plenty of backbone and everything. It's pretty tough. You can throw it around cover, not worry about breaking it off. So this is a great rod. There's other rods out there that's similar. That 7-foot, medium heavy, fast, that's like the go-to. Every rod manufacturer's got one. I know that Loomis feels very similar. Logan just bought a cashin rod, their CRT line, that felt almost identical to it. And that was a very good option. The CRTs are like 130 bucks. That's a very good rod. But that rod right there does a lot for me. I use it a lot. You see me using that white and orange rod a lot. So that's a good one. Here's one that I always have a hard time finding exactly what I'd want to do on it, but I do a lot with it. And this is another Mojo Bass, St. Croix, 7'1", medium, fast. It is their they call it their plastics rod. And I would say it is very good for Texas rigs, 1/4 ounce and under. I was using it in that Douglas tournament a little while back for Cinco. It is perfect for a 5-inch Cinco and a 3/16 ounce weight, 12 pound line. Perfect for your lightweight Texas rigs. Right now I've got a little Kitech finesse jig on there. It's good for that too. I've thrown jerk baits on it. I've thrown crankbaits on it. I've thrown topwaters on it. It'll do a little bit of everything. So it's a good all-around rod. There's nothing that I feel it is perfect for other than maybe that Cinco, but that's not something I do a lot. So you'll see me do different things with this rod. Generally it's an extra. It's not one that I lean on heavily other than that Douglas tournament. But I've got it paired up with another Daiwa Tatula 100 12 pound fluorocarbon line, and that allows me to do pretty much anything I need to with it. It's a good rod. I can do quite a few things, but it would be down my list of rods that I feel like I have to have, but it does have its place in my arsenal. The next one is another custom rod. These last three here, or last two here, are custom rods. Actually, last three. But this is a 7-foot heavy power, and it's an MHX, just like that one that I said was so versatile. But this is one power up. That was a medium heavy. This is a heavy. So it's 7-foot heavy, fast. And before I got that Dobyns, this was my jig flipping Texas rig rod, you know, heavy stuff. And it still does that, but now I can put a jig on the Dobyns, and this can have a Texas rig or something along those lines. Right now it's got a wobble head on it. I've got it paired up. This one's a little bit different. I've run 30-pound braid last year on it, tied to a 15-pound fluorocarbon leader with the FG knot. I used that all last summer for the night tournaments. Because you have to have a line that shows up in a black light, and there's not a lot of great fluorocarbon out there. Sunline has the Night FC, and I do use it some, but I like having one rod with the braid to leader, and this is the one I use for that. Used it all last year, did really well. I've got it on an 8-speed, 8.0-to-1 old Abu Garcia STX. Pretty good solid setup. I can do different things with it. Most of the time it's going to be a Texas rig is what's going to be on it. I may not always fish it, but Texas rig is kind of what it does the best. Jigs will also work. This wobble head works, but it's kind of a versatile rod, but most of the time it's pitching, you know, dragging something. Now that I've got that Dobyns, this one's probably down the list of importance, but you know, it's a good rod to have. The wind knocked over the last few rods here, but alright, so here's another one. This one's really versatile, but in a totally different way. It's another MHX. It's a 7'3" heavy, but it's actually got more of a crankbait style taper to it. This one is one of those rods for me that I use a lot, but there's nothing that it's perfect for, but there's a lot that it's good for. Probably what you've seen me use it for most recently would be the glide bait. I threw that S-Waver, and it does pretty well on that. I've used it for the glide bait. I've actually used it with 50 and 65-pound braid for the frog. It does good for that because it has tons of backbone, but it's still kind of got a softer tip. You can walk that frog really good. Right now it's got a nighttime spinnerbait on it, a big 7/8 of an ounce nighttime spinnerbait. It's great for that. Anything that I need a lot of backbone for, I can use it for that. I've even used it for jigs, deeper and stuff, but it doesn't have the sensitivity as some of my other rods, just because of the taper that it's got, a little softer tip. But good rod right now. Hopefully we're going to catch some on that nighttime spinnerbait at this tournament that you're going to hopefully see after this video. But got it paired up with a Daiwa Tatula 100. It's got the big handle on it, 6'3"-to-1. Can do a lot with this rod. I've got 17-pound line on it. Can throw big heavy baits. I wouldn't go into any of your bigger glide baits with it, but like that 168 S-Waver's good. I've thrown whopper ploppers on it. I've thrown deep diving crankbaits on it. That's what I cranked with all winter, all my deeper diving stuff. So it's pretty versatile. And it's somewhere mid-pack on my rods. I feel like I need to have, because there's just techniques that you need a stout rod for. This is where that one lies. So now you've probably said, you got all these casting rods, what about your spinning rods? And that's what I got here. I've got two. I am going to add another one at some point. But the first one is another custom rod. It's another MHX, just like the other custom ones I talked about. We got a rod builder here close to me that builds with these blanks. They're very, very good rods. This one is essentially a 7-foot medium. This is the rod that you see me throw Kitech on all the time. It's got one on there right now, 3/16 ounce. It'll do basically anything I want to do with a spinning rod. Ned rig, Kitech, drop shot, so on and so forth. Most of the time this is my Kitech rod because it's longer than my other spinning rod. I can get more distance. Both of them, this is an old Shimano Ceros. This reel is garbage now. It is shot. I need to buy another one. But all of my spinning setups, I run 15-pound braid, usually Daiwa J Braid. It's supposed to be bright yellow, like that casting rod that I had a minute ago, like this. But this is so faded, I need to put some on it, but it shows up under a black light so I can see it at night. But 15-pound braid to usually 8-pound fluoro InvizX. I usually buy one spool of 8-pound InvizX, and that'll last me all year tying my leaders. I usually leave my leaders 15-20 foot, and I'll retie them when I get down to about 5 or 6 foot. That works out really, really well. The other spinning rod is probably my favorite feel-wise, and for what I use a spinning rod for, it's probably my most used other than the Kitech. So this is another Ark, just like my Chatterbait rod I had. It's the Tharp series. It's a Meter Man Special. It's a 6'10" medium light. I've got a Daiwa Fuego 30 size on there. Love that reel. That's $100, 110. It's a really, really good reel. Same deal, 15-pound braid to 8-pound fluoro. This is a great, great, great Ned rig drop shot rod. That is where it shines. It does good on a wacky rig too, but I would rather have the medium rather than the medium light for a wacky. But Ned rig drop shot, this thing is money. But that pretty much rounds out. I've got a few other rods, but these are the ones that's mostly all the time with me. I'll I'll take some out if I'm really dialed in on something, which I'm not for this tournament. But if you got any questions about any of my setups, I'm sure I missed some stuff or something you'd like to know, drop those down in the comments, and I will get back to you. I'll answer it. If you like these kind of videos, let me know, because there's a lot of stuff that I can show you guys that I do that maybe helps you that I don't even think about. I forget to give some of this info out, so just help me with that, and we'll see you soon.